In the search for Nancy Guthrie. I am still here in Tucson, Arizona.
That on today.com. The vice president says donations like the one from the Guthrie family will...
It piles pain upon pain.
Theories that her sister Annie Guthrie, brother-in-law Tommaso Cioni, or brother Cameron Guthrie had been involved with the...
There are no words. There are no words. I don't understand.
At 2:28 a.m., Nancy Guthrie's heart sent its last transmission. Not to a hospital. Not to a doctor. To a server. A pacemaker doesn't grieve. It doesn't panic. It doesn't lie. It just records. Timestamp, rhythm, anomaly, flatline. And on the night Nancy disappeared, on the night this quiet Tennessee woman vanished into a darkness that still hasn't fully broken, that small device buried in her chest did exactly what it was designed to do. It witnessed everything. And it kept the receipt. This is day 71. 71 days since Nancy Guthrie was last seen. 71 days since her front door closed for the final time. 71 days of silence from whoever took her, and 71 days of the evidence quietly stacking up in hard drives, server logs, and forensic databases, waiting for someone to read it correctly. Because here's what nobody tells you about modern crime. The perpetrator doesn't just leave fingerprints anymore. They leave data trails. GPS pings. Cell tower handshakes. Event data recorders. Door sensors. Browser histories. Medical portal access logs. In 2024, a person trying to make someone disappear has to fight against every smart device in the building. And most of them don't even know the war has already started. Nancy didn't just vanish. She was erased. Deliberately. Surgically. By someone who knew her well enough to know her routine, her rhythms, her vulnerabilities. Someone who had already been inside her world, digitally, physically, emotionally, long before the night everything went wrong. This is the story of a life that was mapped before it was taken. Before we get to day 71, we need to go back to a day most people have overlooked. Day 11. 11 days before Nancy's disappearance, something happened that investigators would later call a rehearsal. Not a metaphorical rehearsal. A literal dry run. A reconnaissance mission disguised as something completely ordinary, a visit, a phone call, a reason to be there that nobody would question. Think about what that means. It means the disappearance of Nancy Guthrie was not an act of passion. It wasn't a snap decision. It wasn't an argument that escalated. Someone sat down, possibly days before day 11, possibly weeks, and planned this. They mapped her schedule. They noted when she was alone. They identified the gaps in her surveillance coverage. They tested their access. Day 11 was a dress rehearsal for a murder. And the digital record caught it. Because when investigators began pulling location data, access logs, and movement patterns from the weeks preceding the disappearance, a familiar signature kept appearing in places it had no innocent explanation for. The same device. The same approximate time windows. The same behavioral clustering around Nancy's known locations and routines. This is what forensic analysts call pre-crime behavioral mapping. You're not just looking at what happened on the night in question. You're pulling back the timeline and watching the predator circle. Day 11 is where the circle began to tighten. Someone knew exactly when Nancy would be vulnerable. And they had confirmed it weeks in advance. Now we enter the part of this case that separates it from every cold case predating the smartphone era. Because Nancy Guthrie didn't just have a life. She had a digital life. And her digital life is still talking. Start with the pacemaker. Most people don't realize that modern cardiac devices are, essentially, black boxes. They log every significant event, irregular rhythms, rate spikes, rate drops, stimulation patterns, and in some models, GPS-adjacent location data through connected health apps. When investigators obtained the forensic download from Nancy's pacemaker, they weren't just looking at a medical record. They were looking at the biological diary of her final hours. The data shows a clear escalation pattern in the hours surrounding 2:28 a.m. elevated heart rate consistent with extreme stress or physical confrontation, a sharp arrhythmic sequence, and then the number that anchors everything, 2:28 a.m. The exact timestamp where normal human cardiac activity stops registering and the machine simply waits for a signal that never comes again. The pacemaker marked her death to the second. No eyewitness required. But the pacemaker data alone only tells you when. To understand how and who, you need to look at the 41-minute black hole. At a specific point during the night of Nancy's disappearance, a security camera at or near her location was disabled. The exact mechanism, smashed, covered, or electronically disrupted, is still part of the active investigation. What we know is this: there is a 41-minute window between the moment that camera went dark and the moment Nancy's pacemaker logged its final entry. 41 minutes. That's the operational window. That's how long whoever did this had to act without visual documentation. They knew exactly where the camera was. They knew how to eliminate it. And they calculated, correctly, that 41 minutes was enough time to do what they came to do. This level of operational precision does not come from impulse. You don't accidentally disable a camera. You case it first. You identify it. You figure out how to neutralize it without triggering an immediate alarm. And then you execute. Day 11 suddenly starts to make more sense, doesn't it? Now let's talk about the Blue Honda CRV. Vehicles are, increasingly, the most powerful forensic witnesses in criminal investigations. Modern cars are rolling data centers. They record speed, braking, steering inputs, door events, which door opened, which door closed, and when, airbag deployment sensors, and most critically, the event data recorder, the EDR. Think of the EDR as the vehicle's equivalent of an airplane black box. It captures a continuous loop of operational data, overriding as it goes, unless something triggers a save event. A collision. An emergency brake. A significant impact. When that trigger fires, the EDR freezes its most recent data window and locks it permanently. It cannot be deleted by the driver. It cannot be reset without specialized equipment. And once forensic investigators image it, it becomes immutable evidence. The Blue Honda CRV associated with this case was, according to sources following the investigation, subjected to what can only be described as a physical autopsy. Investigators disassembled components, mapped trace evidence, and forensically imaged the EDR. The data recovered from that device placed the vehicle in specific locations at specific times on the night in question, times and locations that contradict the account that was initially presented to law enforcement. The car remembers every road it took, even the ones its driver wishes it had forgotten. This is the part of the story that makes people sick to their stomach. Because the most chilling element of the Nancy Guthrie case isn't the forensic data. It isn't the 41-minute window or the reconstructed GPS coordinates. It's the proximity. The intimacy. The fact that whoever did this wasn't a stranger. They were inside the circle. Let's talk about Dominic Aaron Lee Evans. Bandmate. Friend of the family. A person Nancy had allowed into her life through music, through shared spaces, through the ordinary social trust that connects people in small communities. On the surface, harmless. The guy who shows up for rehearsals. The familiar face at gatherings. The one with a standing reason to be nearby, to call, to visit, without raising a single eyebrow. But during the review of surveillance footage from cameras in Nancy's vicinity, not just the one that was disabled, but peripheral cameras on neighboring properties and nearby commercial locations, investigators identified a figure. The image quality wasn't perfect. It was grainy, low resolution, the kind of footage that defense attorneys love to challenge in court. But there was one detail that didn't require high resolution to see. A wrist marking. A specific, distinctive marking on the wrist of the figure captured in the footage. Investigators compared that marking to known photographs of persons of interest. The match pointed to a familiar face. Someone Nancy would have recognized immediately. Someone who would have had no trouble getting close to her. Someone whose presence, at first, would have registered as safe. That's the most brutal thing about inside circle crimes. The victim's last conscious thought is often confusion, not fear. Because they're looking at someone they know. Someone they trusted. And the betrayal arrives a half second after the recognition. Now let's bring in the other name this community has been watching closely. Tommaso Cioni. Son-in-law. Family. The man who should have been one of the first people with a reason to help find Nancy, not to be examined as someone with questions surrounding their behavior in the hours and days after her disappearance. The pattern of digital activity in the days preceding day 71 includes access to systems and portals that a person with no intent would have no reason to access. Medical portal queries. Location-adjacent digital footprints. Behavioral anomalies that, in isolation, mean nothing, but layered against the timeline of day 11, the 41-minute window, and the EDR data, begin to form a shape that investigators cannot ignore. Two people inside the circle. Two sets of data trails. One missing woman. We are now on day 71 and Nancy Guthrie is still missing. Her family is still waiting. Her community is still searching. And somewhere, the person who mapped her life, who rehearsed her disappearance, who used 41 minutes of manufactured darkness to execute a plan they had been building for weeks, that person is still out there, waking up every morning and calculating how much longer the silence will hold. Here's what they didn't calculate correctly. The data never lies. It only waits. The pacemaker logged it. The EDR recorded it. The cell towers archived it. The surveillance cameras caught a wrist. Day 11 left a footprint. The 41-minute black hole has edges, and edges can be measured. Every device that witnessed any part of this case is still holding its data. Every server log is still intact. Every GPS ping that was recorded that night exists in a database somewhere, waiting for the right forensic request, the right warrant, the right analyst to pull it and read it against the timeline. Forensic genealogy services like Othram have rebuilt identities from less than a strand of hair. Digital forensics teams have reconstructed crimes from data trails that perpetrators believed were invisible. Nancy's case is not going cold. The machines won't let it. Day 71 is not an ending. It's a data point. And this investigation is still running. Now I want to hear from you. The wrist marking on that footage, the EDR data from the Blue Honda CRV, and the Day 11 reconnaissance all point toward premeditation. But here's my question for the comments. Do you believe this was a single-person operation, or does the operational complexity of disabling that camera, executing within a 41-minute window, and managing two separate digital footprints suggest coordination between more than one individual? Drop your theory below. Because on cases like this, the right question from the right person has broken investigations wide open before. Nancy deserves answers. Let's keep pushing.